Hi there, welcome to the Web Developer Bootcamp. I want to take a moment just early on in this course to talk about what makes this program so special. Why is it the only course you'll ever need to learn web development? And I feel really strongly about that. This course is everything you need from start to finish. Regardless of your experience, there's something here for everyone. I'll take you from the very beginning up to complex and advanced topics. So this is the only course online right now that's taught by a professional bootcamp instructor. I teach people to program professionally. It's what I do. I take people from all skill levels, all backgrounds, and I help them change their lives and become web developers. And I've been doing that a few years now at 2 different programs. But the reason that I bring this up is that I'm not someone who thought it would be fun to try teaching on the side online. This is something that I do every day and I'm extremely passionate about. And more importantly than my passion for it is the fact that I get results. So most recently, 94% of all my students in my most recent bootcamp program go on to get web developer jobs after they graduate my course. This isn't a program where we require you to have a computer science degree to even apply. These are people from every background, every situation you can think of. People who are fresh out of high school, who are declining to go to college and instead taking my class. Nurses, retirees, single parents going back to work who want to learn a new skill, bank tellers, waitresses, artists, actors, people from all over the world and all different levels of education. And these are not people who are experts in web development to begin with. Most of my students are complete beginners. They've read a few blog posts, they've tried to teach themselves a little bit. Maybe they try an online program like Codecademy or something, and they enjoy it, but they don't go any further. And after finishing my course, 94% of them go on to get full-time developer jobs. So I feel very strongly that boot camps are a great option for some people, but unfortunately, they're not for everyone, for a few reasons. One, the most obvious, is the fact that they cost a lot of money. My most recent course cost $21,000 to enroll in. It's a lot of money, and most people can't afford that. And on top of that, most people can't afford the time to take 3 or 6 months off where you can't work. You have to figure out rent and food and taking care of your family if you need to. It's really hard to do that. So in creating this course, my goal was to make an online equivalent of these in-person boot camps. Not only is the course much more affordable, but it also is much more flexible. Some people might only be able to put in an hour or 2 a weekend. Other people might blow through it every day, all day, not doing anything else except taking the course. But the goal is that it's for everyone out there. And it's not just that it's more flexible and more affordable, but I really spent a lot of time redesigning everything from scratch. So brand new curriculum, this is stuff I've been teaching for years, and I redesigned every lesson, every lecture, every assignment, came up with brand new ideas and brand new ways of teaching these topics, which is the kind of work that I really enjoy doing. So I have another video where I talk about all the technologies we teach. There's so many different tools and topics that we cover, it really requires its own video. But the main point I want to make here is that everything that I teach in this course is up to date, it's relevant, it's used in industry, it's not dying, it's not in decline, but these are things that are very popular and very exciting. They're things that people want to learn right now. And they're the same technologies that a lot of the bootcamp programs are teaching. So I have no PHP on here as a note, and I wrote that there because I've noticed that so many online courses right now teach PHP. And if you don't know what PHP is, all you need to know is that it's a language, a back-end language that used to be very popular. And the fact is, it still is relatively popular, but it's in decline. It's not something that grows year to year anymore. It's not something that industry and startups and big tech companies are really looking for at this point. But there are so many courses online that teach it, and in my opinion, that's because PHP is pretty easy to teach in an online setting. The setup, getting everyone installed, making sure that the tools work for everyone are really easy to do. And that's not the case with a lot of the more exciting and newer technologies. And I had a lot of reservations about not teaching something like PHP because in my in-person classes, it's much easier to help someone get their computer set up and get their system set up to teach something like Node or Express. Fortunately, I found some technologies online that really make it easy. It's even easier than teaching PHP. There are some great tools that we use that will get you set up with everything you need in a matter of seconds. So that's not a worry anymore, and we can focus on teaching the most exciting, the most relevant things that are being used right now in industry. So PHP is not one of those. Rather, the main focus of this course is on Node.js. And really the main focus is on JavaScript. But I just want to throw it out there that this is the only full stack developer course that takes you from start to finish that covers Node.js. So there are plenty of standalone Node courses out there that either presume you have previous experience or they only teach Node and nothing else. But this course, again, is from start to finish, everything you need to know. Node is just one facet of this gigantic curriculum, this huge web of topics that we cover. And the reason that I mention this right now is that Node is by far the fastest growing, the most exciting technology out there right now. It's the opposite of something like PHP. I do want to make it really clear, though, that I'm not saying PHP is something you shouldn't learn. And I'm not saying Node.js is a miracle technology that solves all of your problems. But in my experience as someone who has taught hundreds of people how to program, helped hundreds of people change their careers, Node is one of the best paths to success, and that's why I'm teaching it. And I expand a lot more on why we teach Node, why we don't teach something like PHP or Python or Ruby, that they're all valid technologies that have worked just fine and that I've actually taught before too. But I've settled on Node and JavaScript as the best way to teach someone to program. And the last really big point that I want to make is that this class is constantly changing with new material, new content, projects, new assignments, exercises that are always being added. Think of it as a subscription to the best content out there for learning how to be a web developer. So this isn't just a one-time thing that as soon as you take the course and you finish it, you're done. That's not how it works. You'll get emails every week, every month with new content. I just added a new project, or Bootstrap 4 just came out, so I've added a Bootstrap 4 module on top of our Bootstrap 3 module. And this is something that's pretty unique. A lot of the courses out there do get updates, but they're not very frequent. It might be once a quarter, here's a new unit. But this course is different in that it's constantly updating with new material, and it just keeps getting better and better as time goes on. And lastly, if you like dogs, there's a very cute dog named Rusty that I feature pretty heavily in this course. If you don't like dogs, just turn the video off right now. Don't worry, we have plenty of cat photos too. But if you like dogs, if you're intrigued by this image, you like those giant ears, then this is the course for you. So to wrap everything up, I just want to go back to the second slide here, where it says this is the only course you will ever need to learn web development. I stand by that statement 100%. If you want to learn to be a web developer, whether it's because you think it will be fun, you want it as a hobby, you want to try and get a job, you want to start your own company, you want to create your own website for a friend or your own company that you already have, this is the course for you. It takes you from start to finish, from a complete beginner up to a web developer. Welcome back. In this video, I want to run through the entire syllabus of this course. We're not going to talk about things in much detail, but I do want to introduce you to everything we're going to talk about. And there's quite a bit, as you can see. This is a very long course, lots of material, very comprehensive. To start off, we do our course basics, which is where you are right now. It's definitely the least substantial unit in this entire course. It just covers things about the syllabus and how the course works and gives you some advice. And then we really get going with introduction to front end. So we talk about what front end development is, what back end development is, how they're different, what HTML is, what CSS is, what JavaScript is. But you still don't write a whole lot of code until this unit, when we actually talk about HTML. So there are 2 units on HTML, Introduction and Intermediate HTML. And then once you finish that, we move on to CSS, which is how we can make things look nice. We add some style in. So that's where the projects start to get a little more exciting. We have you make an image gallery for a photography portfolio site, and we also have you make a blog site. So 2 units on CSS, Intro and Advanced. We talk about things like typography, fonts, including custom fonts, using Google Fonts, forms, validations, lots of topics. Then we talk about Bootstrap, which is a CSS and JavaScript framework that helps you make nice looking websites really quickly and easily. And in that unit, we make a few projects, including a portfolio site and a startup landing page, or a home page for a startup. Then we hit JavaScript, and that's where things, in my opinion at least, start to get really interesting and exciting. We start talking about our first real programming language, JavaScript. So we start with the basics, and there's a lot to talk about with JavaScript, so you can see it pretty much takes up from here down to the end. Everything involves JavaScript, and to be fair, everything involves HTML and CSS as well, but JavaScript becomes the focus. That's how we start making robust web applications, not just simple websites. And I'll expand on that difference in the next unit. But let's keep moving. So JavaScript basics, then we talk about something called control flow, which is how we add basic logic into our applications with JavaScript. And then something called functions, JavaScript arrays and objects, 2 different data structures. And then we move on to my favorite topic, which is DOM manipulation, which is how we actually interact with HTML and CSS using JavaScript. So to some of you, that might just be a bunch of random words you've never heard in your life, or that you can't really make sense of. Basically, it's how we start making things exciting. When I click on a page, something happens. We can start changing colors, animating things, moving things across the screen. It's very visual and fun. Then we have another unit on DOM events, which is some other DOM manipulation that we can focus on. And then we have a color game project, which is a substantial, pretty complex game that we make together. It's an entire unit. It's 8 or 9 videos creating this game. So it's a pretty legit project. And then we move on to a really popular library called jQuery, and we focus on that for 3 units: Introduction to jQuery, Advanced jQuery, and then we build a really nice looking responsive to-do list project together. So that's a code along as well, and it's an entire unit, 7 or 8 videos there too. And then we have a big switch. So everything up until this point, excluding the first course basics unit, talks about front-end web development, which we talk about what that means and what the difference is, front-end and back-end, full stack, all that stuff in the next unit. But I'll just point out, this is all front-end. This is all back-end. So right here, there's a big line where things shift. So we move to back-end and we start by talking about the very basics, just like we did up here for front-end. So what is the back-end? What are the different things that are involved? We talk about some diagrams, we draw some things out, and I show you some examples of sites and how the back end is set up on some popular websites. And then we talk about the command line. How do you navigate through the command line or the terminal? What are the different commands you enter? Definitely the most hacker looking thing that we cover. If you've ever seen like a stereotypical hacker scene in a movie, they're usually typing things into the command line. So we will be talking about that and using that for the rest of the course. Then we talk about Node.js, and this is an introduction to Node.js, and then an introduction to Express, which is a Node framework that we'll be using. Again, I know that's just a bunch of words, but it's a Node framework we'll be using to create our web applications, and we continue with those 2 things for the rest of the course. So then we talk about Intermediate Express, basically some more advanced topics, and then we get to something different, Yelp Camp Basics, and you'll notice there's a few different instances of Yelp Camp. Yelp Camp Basics, Yelp Camp Data Persistence, Yelp Camp Comments, Yelp Camp Adding Auth, and Yelp Camp Cleaning Up. And Yelp Camp definitely starts to sound weird after you repeat it enough times, but what it is a complex application that we create together, and it's one that we keep revisiting. So rather than one-off small projects where it's really hard to get to something substantial with just 1 unit or just a few videos, this is a big project that we continually revisit. And don't worry, we have plenty of shorter, smaller projects. I'm a really strong believer that you should start by seeing a small instance of something working, making a small project, and then apply it to something big so that you get both ends of that spectrum. You're not just thrown into the deep end immediately, making a huge project, but you're also not stuck making these tiny toys for your entire course. I want you to have something that you can be proud of and something that is really, really complex by the end of the course. So Yelp Camp is a Yelp-like clone for campground, campsites, and outdoor activities. So you can create campgrounds, have photos, leave comments, all sorts of fun things, log in, authentication, we talk about authorization, and every time we learn a new feature, we go add it into Yelp Camp. So we start there, Yelp Camp Basics, that's the first time we see the app, and we set up the very basic structure. Then we talk about databases. We talk about MongoDB, which is the particular database that we'll use, and we make a small project there. And then we go back to Yelp Camp and add in MongoDB so that we now have a database connected to Yelp Camp. And then we talk about a really important topic called RESTful routing. This is an architecture, it's a way of planning our applications, a pattern that we follow called REST, and we build a nice looking blog app using RESTful routes and a new CSS and JavaScript framework called Semantic UI, which is similar to Bootstrap, which we learned earlier in the course, right here. And the idea there is just to expose you to another technology, another popular framework. Hopefully you start to see some of the similarities and draw some comparisons there. Then we move on to one of the more important units, database associations. So how do we have multiple things in our database that are connected, like users and comments, or blog posts and comments in tags and votes, and how are they all interrelated and connected to one another? And then we go back to Yelp Camp and we add in comments. So we'll learn about database associations in a smaller project, and then we add it in to Yelp Camp. Then we move on to authentication, user login, signing up, signing out, logging in, all of that using a tool called Passport.js. And we add that into our own application. We make an application with login, a smaller application, and then just like before, we go back to Yelp Camp and we add in authentication so that you now have to log in and log out to use Yelp Camp, or at least to use some features. And then we have another unit of Yelp Camp where at this point we've covered so much that we need to go back and clean some things up, refactor, which basically means move some code around, rewrite some code so that it's cleaner, shorter, more modular. So you'll see exactly what I mean in that unit, but it's devoted to reorganizing this large app because at that point it's gotten very large. And then we talk about authorization, which is another important topic, which is basically user permissions, different levels of things that users are allowed to do. So authentication is just letting people log in. Authorization is making sure that when I'm logged in, I can only delete photos that belong to me or edit comments that I created. I can't screw with somebody else's comments or someone else's posts unless I have permission to do that. So we talk about how that works, and we add it into Yelp Camp. There's definitely a lot of stuff that we cover, a lot of technologies, but the key point is that we go through this in a very logical and well thought out order. I've taught all of these technologies multiple times over to tons of different classes, different students. It's much less intimidating than it might seem. You don't have to be thinking ahead the entire time. But what I will do, rather than just going straight ahead and just doing one unit at a time, we do have certain lectures that are optional, these lessons that are looking ahead and looking back. So basically at certain points in the course, I'll take a moment to say, here's what we've covered, here's where we're going, so that you can start to have a mental map of where we are. Often I found that students get lost sometimes and they don't have a big picture vision in their head of where they are. They just put their head down and focus on what's immediately in front of them. So that is important, but it's also important to come up for air occasionally and talk about where we've come and how much further we have to go and basically draw that line. Okay, so there's a lot of really exciting material, lots of fun projects we get to. Let's go ahead and get started by talking about an introduction to front-end web development.